The morning show had promised to be one of the biggest events of the week as Lorraine Kelly's team prepared for an exclusive interview with Sir Paul McCartney himself. It was a rare appearance from the legendary musician, and anticipation filled the studio like an electric hum. Lorraine, known for her warmth and grace, was genuinely excited to host him. The audience had gathered early, ready to hear stories of the Beatles, the music, and perhaps a few personal reflections. But as the minutes unfolded, no one could have predicted that this would turn into one of the most controversial moments ever aired on her show. Paul arrived at the studio with the easy charm of a man who had lived many lives on stage and in spotlight. Dressed in a casual dark blazer and white shirt, he greeted everyone with polite smiles, his guitar case resting beside him like an old friend. Lorraine met him backstage, exchanging light conversation. "We're honored to have you, Paul," she said warmly. "Always a pleasure," he replied, his Liverpudlian accent still unmistakable after all these years. But even then, a few of the crew sensed that something was off, a hint of impatience in his voice, a distracted edge in his usually calm demeanor. When the cameras rolled, everything began smoothly. Lorraine introduced him with glowing admiration, recounting his decades of influence and his enduring message of love and peace. Paul smiled humbly, his hands clasped, the audience clapping with reverence. The first few minutes were a nostalgic journey through his career, his memories with John, his solo work, and his reflections on how music could still change the world. The audience hung on every word. But then Lorraine gently turned the conversation to more recent topics, activism, modern fame, and the pressures of staying relevant in a changing cultural landscape. She asked him, "Paul, you've always stood for kindness and compassion, but do you ever feel the modern world's lost touch with that spirit?" Paul chuckled softly at first. "Oh, definitely," he said. "We used to write songs about coming together, and now everyone's arguing online instead." The crowd laughed. Lorraine smiled, encouraged by his openness. "Do you think social media's to blame for that?" she asked. Paul nodded slightly. "Partly. But it's more than that. People don't listen anymore, they just react. Music used to bring people together, now it divides them too." His words were sharp but thoughtful. Lorraine leaned in a little, her tone still friendly. "Some would say that music today is more political than ever. Do you think artists should stay out of politics?" she asked. Paul gave a small shrug. "You can't separate music from life, and life's political. But I think what's changed is everyone's so easily offended that you can't say a thing without someone shouting you down." Lorraine smiled lightly, sensing the beginning of a deeper debate. "I suppose that's part of progress, isn't it, learning what not to say?" she offered. Paul raised an eyebrow. "Or forgetting what needs to be said," he countered. The studio grew noticeably quieter. She tried to keep the tone gentle. "But surely we've come a long way in understanding each other better," she said. Paul sighed. "I wish that were true," he replied. "But it feels like we've just learned new ways to misunderstand." Lorraine's expression softened. "You've always been the voice of unity, Paul," she said kindly. "Wouldn't you say it's the artist's job to move with the times?" His eyes narrowed just a little, not in anger but in disappointment. "Lorraine, that's the problem," he said. "Everyone's too busy moving with the times. Nobody's asking whether the times are moving in the right direction." Her smile faltered slightly. "That's an interesting way to put it," she said. "But don't you think progress is important?" Paul tilted his head, his tone still calm but firmer now. "Progress isn't automatically good," he said. "If you're walking off a cliff, moving forward isn't smart." The audience let out a murmur of surprise and amusement, but Lorraine sensed tension rising. "So you think the world's gone too far with change?" she asked carefully. Paul smiled faintly. "I think the world's gone too fast without thinking. And every time someone tries to slow it down, they get cancelled." The word "cancelled" echoed through the studio. Lorraine hesitated, trying to steer the conversation away. "I don't think anyone's cancelling you, Paul," she said lightly. "You're one of the most loved figures in music history." He smiled politely. "Oh, I'm not talking about me," he said. "But I see it happen. People scared to speak because they might say something wrong. That's not freedom, that's fear disguised as virtue." Lorraine tried to laugh it off. "That's a very philosophical take for this early in the morning," she joked. Paul didn't laugh. "Maybe mornings need more philosophy," he replied simply. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Lorraine tried to bring things back to music. "Let's talk about your new album," she said. "It's a beautiful reflection on age and hope. Do you still believe in the idea of love conquering all?" Paul smiled faintly, but there was a hint of weariness behind it. "I believe in love," he said, "but I don't believe we understand it anymore. These days, love's just another word people use until someone disagrees with them." Lorraine blinked, unsure how to respond. "That's quite a statement," she said. "Maybe," Paul said, "but it's true." There was a pause. The room felt heavier. Lorraine gathered herself, her voice kind but cautious. "Paul, you've always been known for positivity. I think your fans might be surprised to hear you sound so disillusioned." Paul's expression changed slightly, a trace of frustration appearing. "I'm not disillusioned," he said. "I'm honest. There's a difference." Lorraine smiled, trying to diffuse the tension. "Honesty's good television," she said playfully. "Maybe," he said, "but honesty isn't a performance." That sentence landed like a quiet thunderbolt. The air grew still. The producers gestured urgently from behind the cameras, signaling Lorraine to move the conversation forward, but she hesitated. "Well, I think we can agree that we all want the world to be a little kinder," she said softly. Paul looked directly at her. "Kindness without truth isn't kindness," he said. "It's avoidance." Lorraine's expression froze for a brief second, then she smiled tightly. "I think we'll have to agree to disagree on that one," she said. Paul leaned back in his chair. "You can disagree," he said, "but it doesn't make you right." The audience gasped audibly this time. Lorraine laughed awkwardly. "Well, that's one way to put it," she said. "We do love your spirit." Paul folded his arms, clearly growing uncomfortable. "I'm not here for spirit, Lorraine," he said. "I'm here to talk about music and what it means. But it seems like everyone wants to talk about what we're not allowed to mean anymore." Lorraine straightened in her seat, her professionalism unwavering. "I think we've touched on some important topics today," she said. Paul gave a short, humorless laugh. "That's one way of saying you're done listening," he said. The tension was unmistakable now. Lorraine tried to regain control. "We do need to wrap up," she said gently. "Your album, Echoes of Yesterday, is out next week. I'm sure people will love it." Paul gave a thin smile. "If they're allowed to," he said quietly. The control room flashed red warnings on the monitor. Lorraine's voice softened. "Paul, we've always admired your courage in speaking your mind," she said. "But maybe we can agree that the world still needs a bit of hope?" He looked at her for a moment, then shook his head. "The world doesn't need hope, Lorraine," he said. "It needs honesty." He reached down, unclipped his microphone, and stood up. Lorraine's expression froze again as she tried to salvage the moment. "Paul, please, don't go," she said quickly. He turned to her with a calm but firm expression. "You invited me to talk," he said. "But talking means listening too." With that, he gave a polite nod to the audience and walked off the set. The crowd was silent for a moment before murmurs filled the room. Lorraine stayed seated, the cameras still rolling, her face a portrait of grace under pressure. After the break, Lorraine returned to the screen, composed as always. "That was certainly an intense conversation," she said. "Paul McCartney remains one of our greatest artists, and great artists have great passions. We thank him for joining us." The audience clapped softly, though the unease lingered. Backstage, Paul's team escorted him out quietly. He wasn't angry, just resolute, muttering, "People want peace, but not true.